Hello, thank you for everyone who is joining the workshop today. This title is Leading for What's Next: Three Shifts to Unlock Innovation, Growth, and Change. For those who do not know me, or at least not know me well, my name is John Bassford. I am an operations consultant, speaker, and author. I've spent my career helping organizations create, manage, and lead efficient and effective operations, which a lot of times is getting to the nuts and bolts of the tactical components of operations, as well as working with leadership to work on their mindset, to work on how they view operations, as well as building a culture that thrives throughout. So throughout this workshop, we're be covering a lot. So I will be moving through each element very, very quickly. At the end of this, I will have links to the next two workshops as well that go a little deeper into the operations side of things, as well as the culture side. But the truth is that we live in a very, very fast-paced environment. Things are constantly changing. We all know the buzzwords of AI and how that's changing the landscape. And quite frankly, what's worked in the past and how we manage, how we lead, how we operate, it's just not going to work today. Things are just different. And for me, curiosity is one of the most underused and talked about leadership skills. To me, it's the key to innovation and navigating uncertainty in this changing world. And what it does is allow us to really change how we think, how we work, and how we connect. And that, to me, is the way to overcome hurdles, solve problems, and think about the future. So that's a quick overview on what we are going to be covering today. So again, as I said in the last slide, what worked before won't get us where we are going. Leadership can no longer be about knowing everything. It's got to be about learning faster than the change that we're facing, and that's going to require us to think differently ourselves, to operate differently, and to connect differently with our teams. And today's leaders are really, really talking about this, right? About how you just can't be the smartest person in the room. Bezos is really championing that right now. A lot of articles about what he's saying about that. And a lot of businesses and organizations are stuck in the same old playbook that they've done for 5, 10, 15, 30, 50, 100 years in some situations, right? And truly to learn and grow and have your organization, your business be sustainable and continue to be relevant. You got to learn to be the conductor of your operations and how your organization is running. And again, that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So let me put this out flat. We are the problem. We are the problem while our organizations are not changing. Comfort, control, fear. These are all very, very natural elements that exist. We can talk about caveman days and Freud psychology, whatever it is that kind of resonates with you and talking about these things. But obviously there is reasons why we have fear, right? Like that's how we learn not to put our hand on the stove and in those type of things. We don't go out, don't cross the street without looking twice. These elements exist for a reason. They've helped keep us safe. They help keep us alive. Habits. If you read Charles Duhigg's book on the power of habits, you learn that without habits, we would literally be paralyzed with thought. We would have to think about every single step of an action. I think the example he gave was turning a doorknob. You'd have to tell your arm to do this, tell your feet to do that, and really walk through each step of the motion. But we don't have to do that. So again, some of these elements, when I talk about habits, comfort, and fear holding us back, they're very natural elements, and it's not something that we need to be ashamed of. But it's also important to point out that when it comes to innovation, growth, and change, when it comes to the status quo, they're absolutely the things that are holding us back. And, we tend to default to what's familiar. Not working the unknown is scary. The fear comes in, the lack of comfort comes in. And when we are fearful or afraid, moving into the unknown, we tend to cling to control. We want to protect what we originally envisioned. We want to protect our leadership role in the organization. We want to micromanage and make sure that people are doing exactly what we want them to do and how we want them to do it and when we want them to do it. And again, these are natural elements. I don't ever want to make it seem like I'm being negative about things. These are very natural occurrences that exist. But curiosity is the way out of these elements. How I define curiosity is the intentional act of looking beyond our current situations and limitations. So here's a great case study I love to talk about when we talk about innovation, growth, and change. Blockbuster was a behemoth in its time, right? We all remember those family Friday nights going and getting a video and checking them out. And Blockbuster had a competitor that was coming up, those red envelopes that came in and out of the mail. And Netflix, apparently, I guess, wasn't too bullish on its future and wanted an exit, and made an offer to Blockbuster to sell for $50 million. And they said no. They stayed committed to their existing model. Whereas Netflix continued to challenge assumptions, continued to think about where the world was going. And, it's a very important point to make that, again, we're often afraid of disruption. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of what's going to happen, what's going to change. And because of that, we don't make these massive changes. We don't disrupt our environments, that sort of thing. But the Netflix case study is a great way to pinpoint the fact that disruption doesn't destroy our companies, doesn't destroy our organizations. It's the rigid thinking that does. That's why organizations don't last, is when they cling to what has always been done before. One of the biggest questions that I love to ask about this situation is, what would Netflix be today if Blockbuster had purchased it? Would it be the streaming behemoth that it is today? Would we have kept these forward-thinking founders of Netflix on staff to where it would have become what it was today? To me, that is almost as an intriguing question. Did they have the growth mindset, the vision of where to take Netflix? And my guess is no, right? If they didn't see the vision to purchase Netflix, I'm not sure they would have seen it take it even further outside of the DVD world and really grow into the streaming world that Netflix, has really taken control of. There's another case study that I want to mention, and this is an organization that I worked for. It was an organization that was struggling, had lost some market share to a competitor, with no real major differences to the two organizations. But there's one area where I felt the competitor was killing us, and that was in video content. And this is a younger market, and video content, as we all know, is king for everyone today, but especially the younger generation, especially 5, 7 years ago. And after researching our competitor and coming back, I went to the founder and said, "Hey, this is an area we got to make a change. We are not doing anything different other than this one simple area, as far as I could really tell. Marketing the same services, same delivery, same value." And what I was told was, that's not the view I had for this company when it started 27 years ago. Now, this conversation was 7, 8 years ago, right? So we're talking about 34 years ago. And so he didn't foresee video content 34 years ago, before YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok existed. And my comment in my head is always, sure, if you had envisioned this, you probably would have created a different company organization. And so, but it showcases several things for me. Like, he was stuck in the past, and how he envisioned the organization, and unable to break free from that. He was unable to change his operations and what we are doing in a very, very simple way. This wasn't about building a platform or major capital expenses, but a small little shift in how we operated that I believe would have made a huge difference for the organization. And then also comes the fact of how we work together, and how we where we allow ideas to come from. Again, the old school leadership is the belief that they have to be the ones that control everything, and the ideas have to come from them. there's probably a lot more behind the story that I won't go into, but it really does showcase, these elements and why this organization stayed stuck and it has continued to lose some of its market share. I just think it's a fact today that just working hard isn't enough anymore. You have to outsmart the competition, you have to outchange the competition, you have to be looking at what's coming next. These are some great stats I think that really showcase this. 70% of all change efforts fail, 10% of strategies are implemented, 80% of value is locked in routines, and 60% of small business owners are winging it. And whether you are a startup, mid-sized business, or a nonprofit or association, I believe all of these stats really apply from my experience having worked across all of those industries. And I really don't think it's a capacity issue. I know for smaller businesses and organizations, it a lot of times comes down to resources. But to me, I always have to come back to, are they being curious enough about how to move their organization forward, how to do more with the resources, how to streamline things, and to look at new avenues to grow the business or organization. So again, you've heard me mention the word curiosity, and I believe that that is the solution to looking beyond. As I said before, I define curiosity, in this capacity as the intentional act of looking beyond our current situations, our limitations. We get stuck when we are operating in the old ways of doing things. We get stuck when we're afraid to look at the new technology or the new strategies that are coming out, or looking at the landscape and the market share, our competitors. We have to constantly be curious about what is around us, how we're operating, and how we're engaging our team in this process. So to become, a curious leader and to drive curiosity, I believe that there are three shifts that are required, because I think curiosity truly will change how we think, how we work, and how we connect. The first one is how we think. We got to let go of certainty. You've saw the stats about the resistance to change and the mindset of change, and why we are stuck in our ways of driven by fear, comfort, and habits. But we really have to shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset in order to move forward. Again, think back to that example I gave before of the leader who simply said, that's not what I had envisioned 27 years ago. Again, this wasn't some major mission change or service change. It was changing a small way. We retooled how we delivered our value to our members and customers. So leaders have to, for a growth mindset to be in place, leaders have to replace control with learning and collaboration. You have to look beyond what has always been done. And the key to part of this is learning to ask questions and explore the unknown. I'm going to get into a little bit how we do this operationally, how we do this with our teams, but it does have to start with the leader. And I think the old management styles of the manager, the leader, the CEO, the founder, having to be the one who has all the answers, has all the vision, finds all the problems, brings forth all those solutions, is what keeps our organization stuck. And when we talk some more about the culture side of this, being able to ask questions and explore, not just externally, but with your team is invaluable. So I challenge each one of you to ask, what beliefs are you clinging to that no longer serve you? What's an old practice? What are those elements in your business organization that have just always been there, and no one dares to question it because it's been there for, again, 5, 10, 50, 100 years, however long your business organization has been around, and no one ever challenges those because it's just what we do. If you have an organization that constantly says things like that's the way it's always been done, or that's just what we do, I can tell you right now that the leadership in the organization is not leading with a growth mindset, is not being curious enough about what is possible as opposed to what we do and what's always been done. So one thing that I like to challenge leaders and CEOs and managers on And when I talk about managers, like you can do this for your department. You don't have to be the CEO, you don't have to be the founder. But I'm not a big fan of mapping out 2x in your business or even 10x in your business. Um, I say map out 20x in your business. What would that look like? And I know that seems like a pipe dream, but you map out what the results would be if you 20x your business and then reverse engineer how to get there. And yes, you are not going to 20x your business overnight, not even probably a year, 2 year, 5 years, right? But if you have that mindset of this is where my organization can go, that's where it begins. I don't know the ins and outs of Bezos's mind when he was starting Amazon, but as we all know, it started as book sales, and it grew into the largest e-commerce platform, and it grew into data storage and grew into streaming. Maybe he had all this visioned out to begin with. I don't know, but just imagine that if someone had the vision of where they wanted to take their company, all the different services, all the different tools they wanted to offer, and then reverse engineered how to make that happen, you're going to achieve those goals much more quickly than if you're kind of getting there by guesswork and by happenstance. So I encourage people, think about what 10xing your organization or business would look like, and then reverse engineer that. The shift two is about how we work. You want to be building engines, not crutches. And here are the ways that I believe that leaders need to lean into a shift in how we work. I define operational excellence as an organization's ability to achieve its intended results as efficiently and effectively as possible. That's looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we are doing it that way. A lot of times it starts with creating efficient systems and documented so they are repeated. So again, we're not just constant reacting to problems that exist, but we're being strategic in what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it that way. A big piece I see as a misstep in a lot of organizations when it comes to how we work is in decision-making alignment process. I work with a lot of CEOs who don't have alignment with their staff, their executives, their managers. And that obviously gets in the way and slows down the progress of making decisions and moving forward. Because let's face it, choosing not to make a decision is choosing to stay where you are. And I think a lot of people just say, well, if I just won't, I'm not making a decision because I don't want to get it wrong. Well, but you're at the same time choosing to keep doing what you've been doing, knowing it's not working. And that doesn't make any sense either. So, getting around misalignment decision making and getting around fear of making decisions, it will be one of the best things that could really move an organization forward. And one thing I like to look at operations is looking at it from an agile development standpoint. If you're not familiar with that term, it really kind of came out through the software world, where they were building websites and apps and everything in the background while it was live, and they were working on them and making tweaks and changes without disrupting what you saw. It might have a quick, a little flash where it goes from one page or one generation to the next, but they keep working and retooling it and fixing problems and improving it while the system is still operating. And I think that's what we need to bring to our organizations and our business in every step of the way. Our sales, our marketing, our accounting, our HR, every aspect of our business needs to be that constant reevaluation. I talk about trusting the process. You got to have a process you can trust. If I think one of the key reasons why a lot of CEOs, founders, managers, executive directors, whatever the title, why they micromanage and get stuck in the weeds is there's a process they don't trust. And maybe that's because there isn't a true process. It's just reaction on repeat, or it is a process, but it's just one that's not working well. And from my conversations with CEOs over the last 8 years as a consultant, I know that a lot of CEOs and founders and executive directors know something's not working. They know, like I just have this feeling that my operations person doesn't know what they're doing. I have this feeling that I only know what I know and I don't know what I don't know. And having a process you can trust is absolutely paramount. So here's my challenge to you on how to shift and how we work. Start by process mapping every major process to find areas of inefficiency, redundancy, and misalignment. When it comes to inefficient practices, a lot of times it's because we're not using technology. It's because too many people are touching it. It's going the wrong direction. It's not working properly cross departmentally. So when you map out those processes and map out who touches it, when, where, and why, you can start to break down where these inefficiencies, redundancy, misalignments exist and work to solve them backwards. Shift three, how we connect. Listen to learn, not confirm. This is all about what I call building a curious culture. Again, the old kind of management style is that the ideas and the vision, the solutions that we have to come from me because that's what I'm getting paid to do. And without that, then I'm not worth it. And I want to challenge everyone to look at leadership as being a conductor. And what I mean by that is the conductor, and I mean that in the sense of musical of an orchestra. The conductor, what they're there to do is really just to keep the flow and the rhythm of all the individual instruments on time. Cue up, whose part's starting and pace it all out so that everyone is working together, making beautiful music, flowing the same direction, whatever analogy you want to use. And to do that requires letting go of some control. You're not the expert. The conductor does not know how to play the flute, the tuba, the violin, the cello. The conductor does not know how to play all those instruments. They got to let control of that. Let the people play their instruments, do their job. It requires letting go of control and not micromanaging that. Here's something I want to challenge you on. Your team knows what's wrong before you do. The problem is we don't ask. I don't know how many times I've sat in meetings when I was a W2 employee and COO roles and VP of operation roles and even junior roles where the CEO, the manager had an aha moment. Something happened and it struck them, crap, we're doing this wrong. And they go to the department, they go to the individuals who are the ones who execute that element of the business or organization. Like, oh, yeah. We've known for a long time that's broken. And what I see time and time again is that what happens in those situations, the leader is upset with the employee. Well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you come to us sooner? And I want to reverse your thinking on that. Instead of being upset with the employee, with the staff member of why they didn't come forward, I want you to think internally and question internally, what culture, what management is happening in the organization where that employee didn't feel comfortable in doing that? To me, to truly move beyond that one particular issue and help solve the problem throughout your entire organization across every problem, every solution that could come up. That's the way to answer that, is to create an environment that empowers your team to solve problems and to innovate. So we're going to obviously break this down a lot more when I talk about creating a curious culture on the next webinar that's happening next week, the 6th. Again, I will be sending out additional at the end of this, when I go to the chat, I will be sending out the links to the next two webinars, but we're going to go deeper in this. Again, what beliefs about your culture are you clinging to that no longer serve you? The way that you manage, the way you see the organization. 9 times out of 10, when I work with CEOs and founders, what they think moves the organization and inspires their team and empowers their team is the exact opposite. Most of the time, I find CEOs and founders who are giving bonuses, giving raises, more benefits, which these are all great things. By no means is any of this negative, and money talks. There's no doubt about that. But in today's environment, especially when you're talking about the age gap and generational gap things. The younger generation and even mid-level, your 35 to 55 year olds, what people want in an organization is to feel valued in the organization and that their contributions are appreciated and the ability to be able to contribute, sorry, to the organization itself. So here's my challenge to you on this one. Go on a listening tour of what isn't working. Most of the time when managers and leaders sit down with their staff, it's about how that employee is working and kind of grading them on how well they're doing on delivering the tasks at hand. Where I believe that review processes should be a lot more about a collaborative discussion about what is working and not working. And you can start by just going to three people and having a discussion, not about how you're doing, but what can this organization be doing to make your job easier and better? And even flip around on yourselves. What can this organization be doing that would make my job easier and better? To make better decisions, to move faster, to let go of control, to trust the process, all the things we talked about in the how we shift our work. Asking those questions about what would make each of those levels better, because I guarantee you're going to start hearing some things like you're kind of a roadblock. Like decisions get stuck with you. I don't have the freedom to make decisions. I don't feel I can tell you when I see a problem without being chastised. And again, I've worked for some organizations that have said things like, you know, we have one chance to get this right. Failure is not an option. You know what happened to the organization? It failed, right? It wasn't because they didn't have smart people, smart ideas. It was all because of the culture. The culture was created in a way that kept people stuck where they are, taught people to keep their heads down, do as little as possible, and not put yourself out there. But when you create a culture around curiosity that allows for that vertical level of discussion up and down, and challenge some of the status quos of the organization, is truly when an organization will move forward. We can't have a discussion about thinking about what's next and leading through what's next without incorporating AI. AI is not going anywhere. I will say that, as someone who has a fight with ChatGPT every single day, even creating this deck, they said they could do X, Y, and Z for me and help me. And they gave me basically a Word document. I said, this does not incorporate colors, images from the example I gave you. And it said, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm going to do it right this time. And then it came back the same thing. So like, I am not someone who believes that like AI is anywhere near fully taking over our jobs. But what it is going to do is help us do better at our jobs. And I know there's a lot of layoffs that literally happened this week. And I know Amazon specifically in middle management was saying that AI is playing a role in that. And I think it is because it is helping us to operate more efficiently, and cut down the learning curve. And so when we talk about changing how we think, work, and connect, it is important that we bring AI into that discussion. It's important that leaders learn to use AI, start playing with it. If you haven't started at all, like it's not really complicated. Paying for the $20 per month for ChatGPT for the premium, or using the ones online, work as well. But literally just start utilizing it for three things. One is reviewing large documents, contracts. Like even personally, I use it for the stock market and reviewing SEC filings and having it tell me what this means for my stocks I own. So use it for reviewing complicated, lengthy documents, so you're not wasting 2 hours reading it, but it can really cut that down and give you that summary. Obviously, if this is an important legal document you're going to sign, you want to at some point read all of it, right? But I'm talking about where that's not really the case and you're just gathering information. You want to do it for drafting. Don't start from scratch. Sketch out what it is that you have in your mind. One thing to always do is, like, if you're a consultant or a brand person, or your organization has certain services or products it has, have a summary sheet. So when you're talking with ChatGPT or whatever AI service, you upload that in there and say, here, quick review my summary of what it is we do and how we do it and why we do it. and utilize that as the backbone of the questions I'm going to ask you. So start playing with ChatGPT that way. And the last one is brainstorming. I mean, literally use ChatGPT as your most favorite business colleague that you love to bounce ideas off of. That's one of the best ways to do is say, hey, I'm thinking about taking my business this way, or doing this with my organization, or changing our services, or changing our products. What do you think about this? What's the market like for this? Just play around and have a discussion. It makes everyone smarter, in playing that devil's advocate role with it, in learning to use it yourself. When it comes to work, yeah, there's other ways that the AI comes into play. Again, in how we draft things, how we review things, putting it to work within your organization. Even there's some, I would say, some areas where just traditional machine learning versus AI are kind of merging a little bit, right? But even things like accounting tools that automatically bring in the details of a bill, so you're not manually entering them. Creating these processes, utilizing these AI tools, the note taker for your meetings, scheduling calendars, using AI for all of these functions in your business. And again, I'm not suggesting that when you're drafting a contract, go and say, hey, AI, draft this contract for me and take that for everything it's worth. Because again, utilizing AI, you have to know enough about the topic to find the holes and where it's missing, because it will miss things. And you have to remind them, hey, look, you're using this old information, not this new information. So you got to know enough about the topic to use AI in that capacity. But there's all these tools and ways to cut down on administration, to increase how we're viewing our organization, how our employees are working. And that's the last part. Once you have an understanding and you feel comfortable with AI, that's going to allow you to encourage the rest of your staff to use it. I seriously would encourage um, everyone to pay for the premium for their staff, for ChatGPT. I think it's a great tool. Again, I have a very love-hate relationship with it, but I use it every day. And it helps me cut down on administration, cuts me down on research, allows me to do a lot of things that would take a lot longer uh, had I not used it. And I think it can get into the place where like language becomes AI sounding, but I think it does help improve how we write. If you're not the best writer, putting something in there and seeing how it rewrites it, and then still making some tweaks to it, right? It can really cut down on that, and encouraging your staff to do that to eliminate time. So we talked about curiosity being the mechanism that changes how we work, sorry, how we think, how we work, and how we connect. And I think there's no better case study for that than Microsoft. When CEO Nadella came in, which I believe was 2013, Microsoft, we all know Microsoft. I grew up with Microsoft, playing with Microsoft Office and Microsoft Paint and all the things that came with it, even when I was in late elementary, probably, at least junior high. So we all know Microsoft, and we've never stopped using Microsoft. But it did start having a shift in how it was perceived, as these other technology and software companies, came about. Microsoft was losing its edge. Um, and Nadella came in and really shifted how Microsoft operated and how it was working. And it shifted it from a know-it-all to learn-it-all. It broke down internal silos to increase collaboration. Again, it stepped into that curious culture elements, encouraged empathy, experimentation, psychological safety, which if you want to hear about those more in detail, you have to sign up for the next webinar where I'm gonna break those down in more detail and really talk about that. And the psychological safety aspect is something that came out of a Google study, which I'll be talking about. But you know, obviously, looking at the numbers here, their stock price went from about $38 to 400, went from $300 billion to over $3 trillion. Through the culture that Nadella built, that's what brought it into Azure, innovation partnerships, all of these things that really helped bring Microsoft into a new era. And I would actually say it did change the business. Obviously, I'm still using PowerPoint to build this. I used the Microsoft Office suite, but Office 365 and going that direction with Teams and SharePoint, all that, it became much more of an enterprise system, which is what allowed the growth to happen. So it did shift the business incredibly from what it was before. But we still have those great tools that we use every single day. But it's expanded into new areas, and that really did spur the growth. So, I hope that this case study is an example of how both curiosity and culture change are not soft skills. They truly are strategic. They help. That's what helps scale Microsoft to that 3 trillion valuation. And I think a lot of times culture gets wrapped up in the notion of hoodies, ping pong tables, and fruit carts. Again, I would say things to Silicon Valley, but it really is about how we work, how we think, and how we connect. That's what the culture is. What we do on a day-to-day basis that drives the results we're intending, and that's really what all of this is about. So, I'm going to take a little bit of time to ask some reflective questions and to repeat those challenges I gave to you in each of those shifts, and then we can absolutely jump into some questions. But again, so I challenge each one of you to write these questions down and think about them. Don't make a jerk response, but where am I clinging onto control out of fear? Control is a byproduct of fear. We don't trust the process. We don't trust our team. There's something that we are not trusting that is driving us to hold on to control, and really analyze that, and how can we break that down, and how can we be more open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. What belief am I still holding on that no longer serves this team? Again, there is something. I don't care how innovative you think you are, how innovative your company or organization thinks it is. There is something that your organization does that does it because it's always been done, and no one's ever challenged it. Whether it's a simple, old HR accounting platform to a market strategy to product development, there is something in your organization, I guarantee you, that you're still holding on to, that you've never evaluated to see if it's working or not. And even a lot of times, it's not working, but you're still holding on to it because either fear is holding you back, control is holding you back, or you just don't know the next steps. Then ask yourself, am I trying to lead the future with yesterday's playbook? Are you using the same tactics, the same strategies? One of the reasons why I believe that strategic planning that we talked about earlier constantly fails is because it's all aspirational. And it's aspirational from the same people sitting around the same table, having the same discussion on where we want to be in 5 years. And what it doesn't do is have a realistic view about where our organization is today. What is working and what's not working? Where is there misalignment in our leadership team? Where's there outdated practices and procedures and platforms that we're utilizing? Things were fragmented. I once worked for an organization that my predecessor drew a diagram with all the software systems that this organization had adopted because they just said yes to everything. And it literally was a spider web, with all the connections and this and that and things that weren't connected. And it like, again, what systems, processes, culture, management styles, what are you clinging on to from the past that you already know is not going to work for tomorrow? And start working on those changes. So again, my challenge is to you to help you change how you think, how you work, and how you connect is map out your 20x vision. Do that next week. Start out with mapping out what that looks like. How big the team is, what the value is, what the products are, what the services are. What does that look like in your head from right now? If you could take everything that you have envisioned for your organization and put that on a map, what would that look like? And then sit on it, come back and tweak that a little bit, bring some others in if you need to, and then start breaking that down. Like, how would we get there? What are the steps that we need to take? Obviously, we're going to have to, at some point, launch this product. At some point, we're going to have to hire these new people. You'll break that down and work it backwards. And I think you will see by implementing some of those changes that you've reverse engineered, how that's going to change everything. In analyzing how we work currently, just run a 30-minute process mapping of your most vital process. Your sales, your marketing, internal operations, product development, whatever it is, whatever you think is the most important process in your organization, map that out. Bring the team in. Everyone who's involved in that process, bring them in. Don't do this one on your own. Again, your team knows more about the day-to-day aspects. They should know than you do. And so bring your team in and map this out together, and then ask everyone, invite everyone to point the holes out that are happening in that process and come up with a better one together. In the next week, meet with 3 staff members. And as I talked about before, do not make this a discussion about where they are, how they're doing their job. Make this about what they are seeing in the organization. If they could change 1, 2, 3, 5 things about the organization that would make their jobs better, that they believe would move the organization forward, what would that be? And also, don't be afraid to ask what could be changed in the organization to make your job easier and better. Because I'm telling you right now, they're going to have some opinions. They're going to blow your mind, help you step back. You got to be open to the criticism of this, but it's really going to, I think, going to change your mind about some things that can change in your organization that will truly move the needle forward. So here are some additional resources. Again, I put QR codes on here for my Curious Leader and Curious Culture Assessment in case you want to take those. But I am going to have the links once I get out of sharing my screen here and jump into chat to answer questions. But if you're curious about my book, The Curious Leader, you can find it on Amazon. Just Google or search The Curious Leader. It will come up. If you're interested in the first chapter of my book for free via PDF through email, you can text the word chapter to 33777. There again, I have my links, but I will go ahead and stop sharing. And if people have questions, I am happy to answer them. So let me, first of all, get you the resources I promised here, and then we can dive into any questions anyone has. And again, no questions wrong, stupid, inappropriate. We're all here to learn and grow together, and happy to help with that. So please let me know if there are any questions here in a second. So the resources there are live for those who want to see those links or contact information. But I will open it up to any questions. I can't allow people to talk. Looks like it's set up for that. So if you do have a question and want to talk, you can raise your hand or simply put the question in chat. Well, while I'm waiting to see if anyone's chatting any questions or people are just taking the time to get those links, which obviously feel free to copy and paste those. I will be sending out some follow-up emails to all the attendees and registrants for this. But I also want to thank everyone for staying on the call. I know when the webinar that when I first launched this, I think this is about the same amount of people that were on. Maybe a few more came on and came off. But I know that time is valuable. People do webinars all the time, and it can be a lot. So I want to thank you for registering and showing up and sticking it through. Any suggestions for beginning the 20X project? Think big. I mean, I don't. We have nonprofits on here. We have tech startups, service companies. There's a lot of different things you can do. Just start with your wildest dreams. Like even my consulting right now, I could tell you masterminds, growing my certifications, all these things that I want to do to help businesses, organizations grow. I mean, I could tell you right now what that is. It's not all going to happen tomorrow. Might even all happen next week. But I have in my head, where I want all this to go, including a SaaS product. Sorry, my dog walked behind us. So just think about, anything you can think of. And again, if you kind of have a roadblock in that or mind block, and can't think of big things, play with ChatGPT. Like, look, this is what I do. This is how I do it. What are some ideas that could take this further to have more impact, to bring more value to more people? So that's really where I would start. All right. When you start mapping out that 20x vision for an organization, how do you balance staying true to your core identity with the need to evolve beyond what originally made you successful? You know, for the most part, you know, obviously when you're talking about 20xing, you're probably talking about some kind of expansion, something beyond your original. Again, I mean, I think one of the best examples is Amazon, which started as a book platform. It is my understanding that Bezos did have that vision of taking it to e-commerce, broader than books. But I don't know that he had that vision for Prime, right? I think the company wants to deliver values and services, from A to Z, right? That's their motto. And so how they delivered that started with books and then moved on to e-commerce, but now it's streaming and digital services and it's data storage. In the AWS with their data storage company, Amazon didn't set out to say, hey, we want to be a data storage company. What happened with that was they needed a better way to hold their own data, from an internal processes standpoint. And once they built it, they're like, crap, like this is good. Like this needs to be on the market. We need to allow other people to use this. And so, yes, is your organization going to change to 20x? 100%. Like for me and my vision for my company, my vision is to help as many organizations and leaders grow. And there's a myriad ways I can do that, right? If you are a law firm and you want to, help people solve their legal problems, you can go into different areas. You can get into mediation, right? There's all kinds of things that you're not doing now that are still true to that core value. And at the same time, I think there are times that it does shift, right? It goes a little broader than what you're currently doing. And maybe at a certain point, if it is a too far of a sideline of what you're currently doing, maybe it becomes its own company, right? It's a spinoff, that's a second company you create or second organization you create. So I wouldn't worry about for this process getting too far away from where you are. First, start out being imaginative and let the ideas just flow and see what you come up with, and then figuring out what is the best way to do that. Like you might say, hey, look, this is three separate companies, and maybe that's your way to grow. But map it out first and figure it out. All right. So you mentioned process mapping as a way to spot inefficiencies for a small or mid-sized team without a formal ops department. What's the simplest way to start the exercise effectively? So let me point out that everything your business does is operations. Yes, I come from the internal operations side. Initially, being that director of operations role that oversaw, finance, HR, administration, tech, all that thing. But it grew into more of a VP of operations, COO role where I oversaw things cross departmentally. So when I'm talking about the operations of your business and process mapping that and breaking that down, that's in every department. Again, if your biggest thing is sales and marketing, that's what drives your business forward, and has to be there and has to be good. Start there. If it's the product development, if you're worried about compliance and that's your big issue, start in the internal operations of your legal compliance and your accounting HR. But having a not having a formal operations department doesn't negate your ability to do this whatsoever. So again, if you think your biggest problem is sales or marketing, bring the marketing team together. And I would do a combination of both, depending how big your organization is. If it's the marketing team is 5 people in the entire department, bring them all in. If it's 200, I would do a mixture of both management and the implementers of the strategies and operations and tactics, because I think that is one area, again, where organizations fail, is that strategies are always coming from management upper level without ever having that realistic conversation with the implementer of, will this work? Can we do it? I mean, the number of times I've sat in a board meeting where the board said, hey, we want you to do X, Y, and Z. And we left and the CEO said, ignore that. We're never going to do that. We can't do that. Like it blows my mind every single time because they don't have that honest discussion, right? And they're not, the board isn't having that discussion with the CEO and the team about whether or not this is even feasible, which is why, again, these plans break down. So start whatever. So just map out the process. So if you're Let me use accounting because I have that know that back of my head. Like a bill for accounts payable, bill comes in. Where does it go? Who sees it? What happens next? All the steps that happen from the contract being signed to how we invoice to when that bill or when we get billed for that, et cetera, and just go through the steps and not just it goes here, here, and here, but who sees it? And one of the examples I have where inefficiencies really come out is I stepped into briefly fractional COO role when a startup's founding COO stepped away because he got burned out. Like, I realized quickly this organization had two entities, three accountants, four bank accounts, five ways of making payments, and had serious problems of duplicate payments, of things not being paid. It was all because of the process. So I simply mapped it out. Like, this is what we're doing. Here's why the problems are happening, and I created a new flow. Again, so this isn't scientific. This all it takes to do this is people who know what that process is. So start it. Whatever you think the biggest problem is, or the process that matters most to your business. Obviously, if this is the area where there's some struggle and maybe don't have people in the room that can help break down and analyze the process, bring in some from outside. If you want to talk to me for a half hour real quick about, ways to do this a little deeper and having a consultant come in and work with this process, happy to do that. But really don't overthink it. Just lay out the processes, lay out the procedures, and map it all out, and you'll see some issues, no doubt. Any other questions? And let me just say by mapping, like obviously you can go out and buy software or lease software that helps you do this. I'm just talking about a whiteboard, just simple whiteboard of let's start here. This is where it begins. What's next? What's next? Great thing about a whiteboard, someone leave some space between steps because inevitably you're going to have someone who comes back and says, no, 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 we forgot this. We forgot this. So a whiteboard is a great way to quickly erase, say, draw something over here and with an arrow and fill it out and really work and play with it. Like don't see this as a gotcha moment or we're pointing out problems. I mean, the goal is that you do find some issues and you help solve them, but this is much more about the innovation, growth, and change than it is about pointing fingers and pointing out a problem, right? We're doing this not to be critical, but to be curious about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and is this the best way to accomplish that? All right, we are coming up 4 more minutes left here of the hour, so I kind of booked the perfect time for this. Any other last minute questions here? Again, feel free to email me if you don't want to ask here. Happy to jump on a call. Give you guys my Calendly link. So I'll just give it 1 more minute here to see if anything else pops up. All right, looks like people are kind of dropping off here as it's tailing off. So again, I want to thank everyone for showing up for the webinar first and foremost, and sticking around. And thank you for the very very thoughtful questions. And it always helps me see where the questions come in and where I can be better value and provide some additional content to individuals as well. So it sounds like this process mapping aspect might be something we need to do for its own um, webinar. But I'll work on incorporating that some more into the third webinar, which is on trust the process. And I'll break down, how to exactly map out this process and where to get started. So we'll cover that there. So hopefully you can all register for that, and we'll go in more detail. All right, but again, I want to thank you guys all for coming and appreciate everything.